Wow. So you really connected the dots pretty well, Ajay. And then your experience, your exposure to this always was in the background. Why scaling up framework?
Yeah, so in the beginning, when I started off as on the advisory board of startups, and I was mentoring them. I was a part of mentoring programs in Thai. I was a part of advisory board of companies external to them. I've been an angel investor. I'm still an angel investor, so I've been investing in companies. And then one of the things that I noticed as these companies that I had either mentored or I had invested in started growing, I discovered that as a startup, you have frameworks like the business model Canva. These are good enough framework for startups.
Correct.
But once a business grew to a certain level, you're talking about 5 million, 10 million, 20 million kind of levels that you reach. And some of the companies that had invested in started reaching that. I noticed that there was a dearth of framework. They weren't really any good. For the startups, you had basic tools. For large corporates, you had all the big fours, consulting firms. But the mid-sized companies really had a dearth of tools and systems. And then I started looking around, and that is when I got introduced to scaling up. And the first thing that struck me was that when I have led businesses, I have grown teams, I've led grown businesses worldwide. A lot of the things that I did in my career, leading businesses successfully, are some of the things that scaling up the framework talks about. If you talk about KPIs, daily hurdles, quarterly meetings, doing weekly sprints of 13-week sprints, these are exactly all the things that I've done in my own life. And I know that these things work very effectively. But this is the first time that I saw that there's a holistic framework that was there that incorporated all these elements, a lot of the things I knew and a lot of things I didn't know, right? That
Mm,
really came together in this framework. And that's what attracted me to look at certification and scaling up. And I pursued this. I found out that there was not a single coach in India. And I
yeah.
decided that let me take the plunge. And so I became the first certified scaling up coach in India about 5 years back.
Wow. That must have been a very, very big first step in this because there was no one in India and you did not know how impactful this would be. And I now, looking back, I know it has created a big impact in many, many companies that you have worked with. And uh, I can vouch for this because I've seen those companies transforming. That's wonderful. My question is, after taking up that scaling up certification, is there any particular business that you attracted, or is there any industry that it was applicable to, or is it different? A lot of companies would say, my business is different. We are in a different field. It's not common to anyone else. We have special problems, special issues. How does this one single scaling up framework addresses that?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid question, and we get asked that a lot. There are a lot of people who turn around and ask us, our industry is different. Our industry is
Uh,
unique. But I think the fundamentals of any business are still the same. You do have an organization, you do have people, you have to have processes, you need to have a strategy, right? And you need to manage your cash flows, right? So the fundamentals of any business, any organization are exactly the same. They're not too different. Let's call it the bare shell structure or the skeleton of any organization is the same. All human bodies have the same organs, right?
yeah,
What
yeah, yeah.
changes is basically the external form factor. And that I think that's exactly what happens to businesses. Depending on the kind of business that you are in, there could be variations of what you have, but the fundamentals don't change. That's first. The second thing that the scaling up framework is agnostic to an industry. It was not built for a certain industry in the first place because Vern Harnish, the guy who created this framework, he was also the founder of EO and he's worked with many mid-sized businesses across the world. And when he created the framework, he made it agnostic to any industry. Why? Is because of the same challenge. So
Yeah.
because of which, in fact, when we work with, I mean, today we work with companies that are in IT, we work with companies in manufacturing, we work with companies that are into services. We work with crossword bookstore chain, a retail store. We work with e-commerce companies. We work with universities. We work with IB schools. We work with companies that are in so many domains. We even work with a tattoo studio company, right? How much more interesting than it gets me beyond that as it is. So these are the things that really come in. And what you find that is obviously you need to tweak the framework because it's not exactly one size fits all thing, but the
Correct.
fundamentals are the same. Beyond that, you need to tweak the framework to make it work for a particular organization, depending on what their challenges or priorities are. And that's what really changes. And then obviously, depending on what kind of business one is in, one needs to make sure that you make those modifications. So I think that is the only element that comes into play. Otherwise, the framework, the fundamentals don't change, because of which the application also does not change. What might change is What do you do, when do you do, and how do you do it? That's about it.
Yeah,
But the fundamentals still remain the same.
absolutely agree. The scaling up book sometimes talks about a lot of companies. Let me put it this way: a lot of companies want to scale up. They really want to expand their operations, but we know how many startups go to that level and how many just flounder at the bottom or stay there. What are important barriers to the scaling up a business or to expanding the businesses? Is there something that the audience can understand and look at it? If the book advisor of, from your experience, what would you say?
Uh, Again, I mean, this is a question that we ask to a lot of audience, and I think you also have a poll out there, Ajay. If you
I
want, you
have a
can
poll, but it will come
figure that
after this
out.
question. I have
Yeah,
a poll,
yeah,
but that would come after this question. So we will
yeah.
leadership
So,
challenge or
so
whatever.
to preempt this, really, in a lot of forums, when we go and we ask this kind of question to the audience, to business owners and all that, or possibly executives from organizations, 60% of the time that you get the answer, the biggest barrier to a business to scale is money or finance or, capital per se. I mean, that's the question. A lot of the other questions come around mindset, answers come around mindset, stuff like that. But there's been a lot of research that went in to say that, okay, like they say, there are negative element that you need to take care of, and then there are positive element that you need to build upon, right? So one of the things that we've seen recurringly when you work with companies, what are the three most critical barriers to scaling up any business are actually first is leadership development, right? The leadership team in the organization, the first level, second level, developing them. Because if the leadership is not developed, then the ability of an organization to scale becomes extremely tough. You could hire some leaders as you keep growing, but you're not going to replace all of them. There's going to be a lot of upgradation of skills, knowledge that has to happen within your leadership team. So that becomes the first barrier, actually. And we're not talking about 20%, 30% growth. We're talking about if a company wants to scale 2x, 3x, 5x, 20x. We're talking about this kind of scaling. That's first. The second fundamental element that comes across, which people underestimate quite a lot, is the scalable infrastructure. And infrastructure obviously starts with physical infrastructure, goes beyond that to systems, processes, software, tools that you really operate within. And all of that can become a big hindrance. Physical is obviously a no-brainer, one does understand that. But again, when you look at ERP systems, CRM softwares, or any of the other tools, you can't take on something very large in the beginning and you have to keep upgrading as you go along. The challenge always comes in how quickly do you do it? I mean, you can't space it out too much. So it becomes an interesting challenge. As you keep scaling, your scalable infrastructure can hold you back also.
Correct.
And the third thing, which is the most important barrier to scaling, in our opinion, is marketing effectiveness. Because at the end of the day, it cannot be a sales approach that helps you to grow. If you want to grow 3x, 5x, it's not a sales activity that is going to help you. It's you create a value proposition, you create a positioning in the market that your customers are coming to you. And this becomes the critical facet. So if you have all of these three things right, if you keep investing in leadership development, in scalable infrastructure, and in developing marketing effectiveness, then your ability to scale now starts really unleashing itself. And that's what it comes to. So I think if any business owner or business founders, they focus upon investing in this in the fundamentally right from the beginning as they grow along, I think that can make a big difference to their ability to scale.
Very nice. Leadership, infrastructure, and marketing effectiveness. Three barriers to scaling up is what. Now let's listen to the employees, gentlemen, ladies. There will be a poll on your screen, and I would request you to pick up the choice that is what is the biggest challenge in scaling up your business. Now, there are important ones written here that we see and understand in the market, but what is it for you? The webinar will be, we will be addressing the questions or depending on how the answers come on this poll. So please pick the right answer for yourself and click on submit. If is it hiring, retention, or leadership development? Is it identifying and defining growth plan, strategic thinking, or is it consistently delivering results or execution of the strategy that you talk about? Or is it accessing and managing financial resources? Ajay just mentioned of cash. So has it been done?
Yeah.
We'll give
So
10 seconds. Is it? Is it done?
14, 15 people have responded so far.
So we have 23, and I think everyone can put their
Yeah,
first
so we have
choice.
about 15 responses now. So the highest,
Okay,
so consistently delivering results, which is the execution part, is the one which has got the highest number of votes. This
okay,
is followed by the strategy, that is identifying growth plan, that is about 27%.
okay.
The people, which is hiring, retention, and leadership, is about 20%. And assessing and
Cash is the
managing
last.
financial risk, cash is last at 13%. Thank
Very
you,
good. So
everybody, for
thank you.
participating.
Thank you, Sangeeta, and thank you for everyone to have cast their choice of one there. And here are the results that are shown. Consistently delivering results. That's the most important part. So let's pick up this one, which is picked up.
If you are able to track this early, this is not a post-mortem that you can do at the end of the quarter, end of the year, saying that, hey, we thought we'll do this, it worked out, it didn't work out. It is that every week that you're able to take a look at and say, where do you stand today? So you're assessing yourself every at a frequency that makes it easy to course correct if you're off track, right? So that's what you do. And then the last part to that is, how do you ensure the right decisions and fast decisions are happening in the organization when any of these things are happening? And for that, you have to have the right meeting rhythms. So
Yes.
this is the way that the framework really helps in driving great execution. It ensures the right priorities and alignment of priorities within the organization. It ensures that you're able to measure the right things to move along on that path. And then it ensures that you're setting up the right meeting rhythms inside the organization to ensure that decisions are taken quickly. Things are not stuck. It's not a bureaucracy loop. It's not an email trail that starts from one department to the other department and then everybody's trying to figure out, right? You solve things on the go. And this is what really ensures that the organization achieves what kind of result that they want consistently, time after time.
Very nice. I think this is the problem that most of the organization faces. And there is something called aligning the organization on one goal, and that also would help execution to happen seamlessly. What does your framework does in aligning the whole organization of maybe 50 people or 100 or 1000? What is that special thing that scaling up offers that the whole organization gets aligned on one single goal?
So the one thing that stands out in this framework is something that's called a one-page strategic plan. Now, typically, if you go to any organizations, and typically, if you ask, and these are plans that are put together. A strategy plan for any organization would span 20 pages, 40 pages, 50
Correct.
PowerPoint slides for all you know. The interesting part is the people who drafted the plan themselves, if you ask them after 3 weeks what is in the plan, they will not have an answer. Forget about 3 months or forget at the end of the year. Is that plan looked at a frequent level? Not necessarily. So maybe a lot of energy and time and effort goes into create this plan. I've met organizations when I asked them, can you show me a plan? I was given a thick booklet, right? Which had everything detailed beautifully, printed beautifully, but that was just a showmanship, right? It was just something that somebody put together to impress somebody. Was there anybody even looking at it? Are we even, whatever
Right.
we thought about, are we doing? So it doesn't really happen. So you need to simplify strategy enough to a level that what the scaling up framework is into a one-page strategic plan. The whole essence of scaling up is not complexity, it's simplicity. So at the fundamental level, it seems very rudimentary that how are we trying to encompass strategy of an organization into a single document, a single page that one can keep in front of you. If you know what are the components, you're able to understand where does it stand. But that's just the starting point. So this is just where you capture in your strategic plan in a Twitter or an X kind of a manner with minimum amount of words, but you're able to articulate everything. That's point one. But point two, more important than that, is also the frequency at which you look at it. Are you reviewing that plan? Are you taking a look at it? Are you checking? Are we progressing on the path that we decided that we want to progress? And if these two things happen, that means you're able to create this in a simplified enough fashion. That's one. Second is you're looking at it frequently enough. That is second. And the third part of that, is there a simplified version of the plan that you can give to everybody in the organization? So the OPSP, or the one-page strategic plan that the scaling up framework has also a simpler document called a vision summary, which can be given to every single employee. In fact, we tell this to a lot of organizations that ensure that you create a vision summary and put it on the desk of every employee so that every single day an employee is able to look at some key elements which are important for them to know as far as the priorities of the organization are concerned. What are your brand promises? What shall be had? What are your values? As well as what are their individual KPIs and priorities for that particular quarter. Now, in one document, in one A4 sheet, a person can put it up on their desk. They are looking at it every day when they're working. So they will never lose sight of it. They're aligned to it at every point in time. So this is the process where I think Rajiv Bajaj said this beautifully. I heard one of his talks of Bajaj Auto. When he was talking in one of his talks, he speaks about your strategy should not be in the boardroom. If you go to the watchman of your factory and you ask him what's the strategy of our company, he should be able to say it in a couple of sentences. Strategy should be dummified enough to that extent, right? And scaling up the framework actually allows you to do it. It allows you to bring it down to a level where everybody can articulate and understand it. And that is why strategy works when you implement it in the right fashion subsequently.
Absolutely. Very nice. I think this was the second preference of topic that audience had polled. Strategy is something very, very important. And if you are interested in getting this one-page strategic plan, especially the audience who are here, there is something that we can do for you. Write us a mail and we'll send you a link. You can download that one-page strategic plan, study that. And if you need any help outside that, we are here to give you that kind of guidance and support, which would help you draft one-page strategic plan for your organization. Ajay, the third point that people had picked in the poll was people. Now, in my opinion, also, I've always considered people as one of the most important challenge. And considering today's scenario, and yesterday only in one of the companies, people were saying that they're not able to get the right kind of people to hire. The young generation is very fickle minded and they shift jobs in 6 months or 1 year. Somebody is offering a better job, or they don't, things do not suit what they are doing. They have very limited attention span and they're not ready to go beyond what they know now. This is what and manufacturing company head was telling me yesterday. But how in our scaling up framework, uh, how do we get these people organized? There is a concept called A players, or can you please elaborate on this people part of strategic of success of scaling up framework?
Yeah, I think that's a great question again, and I think like we all know that people are your biggest capital in most organizations. Definitely in knowledge organization, 100% yes. In consulting businesses, absolutely yes. But even in manufacturing, even in their domain. Now the interesting question, and you did mention about Gen Zs, the different attitude or different approach. But I think a fundamental question that we tend to go and ask companies, rather than just pointing fingers at the people who are coming on board, are you looking at the fingers that are pointing back at you, right? As an organization, are you first of all creating a great culture? As an organization, are you living up to your values? Do you have a purpose that you're really working around? Now, these are essentials, and these are not something that you put as posters on the walls, values and purpose statements. These are some things that an organization should be living, because it's an empty thing to turn around and point fingers and say, hey, this person is not happy, this person is leaving us. The first fundamental, are we creating an environment in which people want to stay and work? That's point A. Now, it's a very critical thing, and I'm sure a lot of people who experience like Vikram, I can see so many other people, I can see Anand, they have worked in professional organization, this, that we have enjoyed working in an organization where there's a great culture, there's a great environment. So as a business, when we're building up, are we doing that? That's starting point. The second element to that is not just the culture. Are we hiring for values? Because for a value fit, unfortunately, what really happens is we create a set of values and we put it on a wall. An important element to values is to ensure that when you're hiring people, are you checking for a fit on those values? And that becomes very important, because when you have an alignment of values, then people are attracted to come to you because of the purpose of the organization that is there is much bigger as it is. That is what changes the game, because people are interested in money. No doubt about it. Nobody says that I'm not interested in money, but there are more important things also along with them. That is the environment and the virtue. That's the purpose toward which the organization is working. That is the values that the organization adheres to. All of these are important. I can tell you, we worked with a company, which is in Pune-based company itself, that manufacture these accident systems, right? Speed radars and speed attenuators for the highways, right? And, they have a beautiful purpose statement, so that every person should reach home safely every night. That is the purpose statement. So then they have a team that works with them, including they have a software team that works in that organization. The beauty of that even though there are 50 people software team, because they have software solutions within their products, their attrition rate is extremely low. Why? Is because the people who come and work with them are attracted to them for the purpose. They know that the software they're developing is going to help save people's lives. And there are enough actually examples where accidents have been prevented because the system were deployed on the roads. Right. So people who come to there to work, you are sitting in Pune, you have the all of the software companies around you who'll offer them better salaries, right? It's not that they would have a dearth of jobs, and they're not leaving because they don't have jobs. They're not leaving because they enjoy what they do. They like what they're contributing towards. They feel a sense of value addition from the work that they do. And that becomes a big game changer. And this is just the starting point. And I think beyond that, it all boils down into if you are hiring for the right value. So when you see a good alignment of values, and then you start measuring productivity by using great KPIs, that is where the concept of an A, B, and C player starts emerging out here. And it's a very important concept to understand in an organization, because as an organization, if you do not consciously see, right, people who are scoring high on values at one axis and high on productivity on the other axis, on the extreme right of that, on both when you are on the top scores, you'll have A players, right? These are the kind of people that you want. These are people with initiative. These are people who are wanting to contribute, who do not need guidance beyond a certain point. They're able to take care of things. And then there are B and C players. Now, organizations are willing to live with C players, but C players are people who are low on values as well as low on productivity. And that doesn't help you because the A players get demotivated by that. So there are a lot of dynamics at play out here. And we've seen that happen in most organizations. When you go in there, when we analyze the leadership team, when we ask the leaders to analyze their people under them, and we figure out that, hey, there are C players in leadership teams, or there are people who are blockers right now. And removing those blockers will make a big difference in terms of promoting younger talent, where younger talent can come up and take up responsible leadership roles. They are dynamic, they're willing to put in that effort, and that changes the whole game. So the point is, these frameworks, when applied in the context of building a culture, in the context of hiring the right people, in the context of evaluating how your spirit of leadership team is, and in your efforts to move people then across from B to an A, or an A to an A plus as it is, that is what really gets you the best kind of output as far as people are concerned. And like they say, without the right people, and that's why the first barrier is also leadership development, right? If you don't focus on that, there's no way the organization is going to grow.
True, true. Very rightly said, Ajay. We were talking about A, B, and C players. What do you do with C players? Is it this is a problem that a lot of organizations face, and honestly, they might have been working for donkey's years. There might have been some connections. Some what do we do with C players? Is there any idea that you can share on?
No, I think it's a simple fact, right? At the end of the day, see, the fundamental problem is most organizations do not have good KPI systems. And KPI systems is not just driven out of measurement of output. One of the things that the scaling up framework talks about is, do you measure the input also? We call them leading indicators. Now, why are they important? Because output is not in a person's control, but the input effort is in the person's control. Most organizations, I mean, I worked for 27 years in the corporate world. Believe me, I very rarely saw leading indicators being used as KPIs. You typically had KRAs and KPIs defined out. Believe me, most of the organizations, we see them. You're lucky if you saw them at the end of the year in your appraisal. Even if you saw it once in a quarter, that was an amazing achievement. But interestingly, the scaling up framework, we look at it every week. That means once you do KPIs, you're actually looking at KPIs every week. And when you're putting in leading indicators, those are under control of people. Now, this is where the wheat from the chaff gets separated, because it doesn't take too long to understand the bullshit from the reality, right? Understanding, who's giving and who's contributing and not contributing. All of that comes across so much more simpler and faster. And that is what really helps, because over a period of time, there's no rock under which the C players can hide them. Right? They are undermining your confidence. They are undermining the value of your organization because they're already low on that. And now productivity was never measured earlier in the past systematically when such had measured. Then there is no rock under which these people can hide. And then it becomes so much more easier and simpler for them to figure out an exit path for them, because you can put them in PIP and whatever else performance improvement plans and exit them out. So I think my recommendation to ensuring, if you have C players, to exit them, first of all, implement good KPIs or OKRs. And Vikram, I'll talk about that in a bit if you want. KPIs or OKRs, you put that in place. And then beyond that is to ensure that you're separating the wheat from the chaff, and what you clearly identify as C players, you ensure you help them grow them out, right, of the organization as fast as you can. Because the longer they stay, the worse off they become. I'll take a moment of detour if you want, and let's
Yeah,
answer Vikram's question. So OKR versus KPIs. So I think fundamentally both are similar in driving what you really want to achieve organization results, right? That's what both of them are focused towards. I think the essential difference between both is the philosophy. OKRs are driven more like moonshots. That means an OKR has to be out of reach. If you achieve OKRs, then by itself, then the OKR was poorly set, right? Getting to 70% of an OKR or 80% OKR is an achievement by itself. 100% OKR means that first of all, you set up an easy goal. So this is supposed to stretch your imagination. That's the only fundamental difference between a KPI and OKR. KPI, you can stretch goals, or you can set up goals that you really want people to go and achieve. Because the only difference is that, and especially in the method that we follow under KPIs, we follow a color coding system. That means, if you're ahead of your goal, if you're 120% plus, it's at the blue. You're at 100 to 120, it is green. It is 80 to 100, you're yellow, and below 80, it is red. Now, the color coded dashboard is really creates a peer pressure, right, within the system. So both are great things, in my opinion. As an organization evolves, I think using KPIs is a good starting point. And once you fundamentally implement KPIs and you've got a maturity of a leadership team, maturity of processes, possibly OKR can be the next step to that, because then it will help you. But if you go to OKR straight, right, it's going to be being pretty demotivating for the entire organization, because you don't even know, are you benchmarking the right things? Are you measuring the right things? So that's my quick answer to you, Vikram. I mean, we can go into a long question. I mean, I love the book Measure What Matters by John Doerr, right? It's one of my favorite books. But it's a great philosophy per se. But a lot of mid-sized organizations, I think it doesn't really work out in the beginning. You should do it later on as you mature. That
and
never previously had one. That's your question again, Vikram. How do you implement KPIs, right?
yeah,
So fundamentally, when we work with the organization, we figure it out that it takes easily about 3 quarters till the time you get KPIs right. So, you start off, right? You look at what is the goal of the organization. You look at what is the JD of the person, right? What is the person been hired for? And then you try to figure out what are the lagging indicators and leading indicators, and you put that in place. Now, the goals you might have might or might not be right. And it's only when you do it 2 quarters is when you start realizing that, were you too ambitious? Were you too pessimistic? Were you too optimistic? Were they the right metrics? We have 4 certain conditions that we put in for having great KPIs, right? So, we ensure that we look at whether these conditions are being fulfilled to have a great KPI. And then by the third quarter, we come to a point where we say that, hey, now we are confident that these are good KPIs for any role to work with, in an organization. And then the beauty of KPI is that every quarter you can change them. You don't have to do KPIs for the whole year. So you can do KPIs for 13 weeks, and we call them 13-week sprints, so that you can focus upon what do you want to achieve in this quarter, move there. Maybe next quarter your KPIs might change because your focus is slightly shifted now, and you focus on what's most important for you at that point of time. So it gives you a dual dynamism. You are focused on the organization goals, but you're also focused on what's needed at this quarter also. You're able to balance both of these simultaneously. I hope that answers the question, Vikram. Okay,
yeah.
wonderful.
And
Sorry,
in our
sorry
scaling
for
up
your
framework,
regression,
just one
Sanjeev.
point to add, Ajay, that we have maximum 5 KPIs per quarter. So there is a focus, there is an attention on each of those KPIs for everyone in the organization. So having it limited to 5 makes a very big difference in the output that you would get at the end of the quarter.
Yeah, in fact, 5 KPIs and 5 priorities. So we also have priorities, that what is it that you want to focus upon, which are not necessarily measurable at an ongoing basis, but where progression is also important. But you're right. We do not recommend more than 5 KPIs for any person at any given point of time, because just because you're chasing 10 KPI doesn't mean you achieve them any which way. Yeah, Rajesh,
And
back
we've
to
seen
you.
the success of having limited number of that's very important part of this. So there's one request. If you have any questions, please put it on the chat box, and we will take it in another 10 minutes time when we reach that around 4:50 or so. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions uh, on people, on ABC players that you might think of, because this is something that you would connect it very, very easily. So please feel free
So
to answer.
So there's a question from Milind Patwardhan saying, what are OKRs? OKRs is objectives and key results, Milind. It's a system that was promoted by this book, by John Doerr, Measure What Matters. If you've not read the book, you should read the book. It's a fantastic book because OKRs have been successfully implemented. Organizations like Google, LinkedIn, all of these organizations have amazingly used OKRs to drive fabulous outcomes. And I personally believe it's a fantastic system of driving performance. And like rightly what he says is measure what matters is you focus on the important things, you measure it, and that is how, and like they say, whatever you measure gets done, right? So that's the whole logic of it, Willem, in a short answer to you.
Yeah. Very nice. Actually, OKR, company like Intel transformed themselves completely, and John Doerr worked with them, and they transformed completely uh, within a span of 9 months in back in 1980, 1980, in 80s. Wonderful. Thank you, Ajay, for clarifying and taking the question in between. If there are any questions, please put on the chat box and we'll be very, very happy to answer. But my next point, Ajay, coming back to the scaling up framework, is also about companies having multiple customers, multiple segments in within the customer frame. How the scaling up framework addresses that. Now, there are stories of how Apple does that, but then how, as an organization, I have so many customers, I want to fulfill everyone's need because that's my revenue coming in. How does getting a framework addresses this?
Yeah, I think it's a good question again because typically when smaller businesses start off at the beginning, you are happy to have anybody as your customer. So you're willing to take
Correct.
a customer no matter what color, size, shape, what kind of money they bring on the table. A customer is a
Absolutely.
customer. And that's a normal approach that is valid absolutely at certain point of time. But once you start growing, I think somewhere at some point of time one has to start taking a decision because if you are everything to everybody, you are nothing to nobody. Right. Basically, the fundamental fact behind that is you cannot please and serve everyone effectively. So, at some point of time, as a business, one has to start analyzing what are all the customer segments that you're serving. Amongst them, what are the most profitable ones? Because the profitable ones are the ones who find value in what you're giving, because of which they're willing to pay you more. Right. The others, where you are under competitive pressure, is either because your pricing is bad, right, or else it's a highly competitive market because you cannot charge more because there are five others who are giving something similar. Now, automatically, it means that if you do not derive more profitability from a segment, then those are not necessarily the best segments for you, unless and until you don't innovate further, first of all. So, you first figure out which are the customer segments that you can serve more profitably, where they find what you offer invaluable, where they're willing to pay you more. That's what is ultimately your ICP, or ideal customer profile, or core customer, like we call them. Now, once you define that out, then ensuring that you serve them so well that you actually start becoming unattractive to other segments is a risk that most businesses aren't willing to take. But that's a risk that one should be willing to take because when you serve a set of customers so extremely well, then you really understand them in and out. You understand their pains, what the gain they're looking for so well that you are able to deliver superlative value to them. And once you start doing that, that is where you're going to have longevity of your customers. You'll have customers becoming your raving fans. They are going to go and tell others, if you want to work with somebody in this space, work with this company. And believe me, that is what is marketing effectiveness because what you really want is your customers going and becoming your salespeople rather than your salespeople trying to find customers. And that comes across after you do your core customer. Create a fabulous brand promise. What is the value that you're telling to customers? What can you articulate? What can they get from you? And then, even more powerfully, a next step to that is can you create a brand promise guarantee? Right. And we have several examples of companies that give fantastic brand promise guarantees. And that becomes a ping point for a decision. A customer is now willing to take a decision because the promise guarantee tells him that if I make a mistake, I'm covered. Right. And the second element is also internal to your organization. Now you're putting pressure to deliver on your brand promise. That means you cannot now under deliver there, right? You have to over deliver on your brand promise because if you don't, then there is going to be a cost or impact to the organization. So all of this creates an enormous juggernaut of success because now you have a customers who love you. You have your customers who are willing to pay you more, and you have your customers who are promoting you to others, right? What better situation than to have in that as it is? And then once you own a segment, then you can always build yourself in the next segment. Nobody says that you have to only stay to that segment later on. You can build different offerings. You can create something else for segments as you grow, but own them. Like they say, just like Shivaji would have done, right? Capture one fort at a time, right? Do the guerrilla tactics when you're a smaller business, right? If you're an MNC or Procter and Gamble or something, it doesn't matter. You can go and fight the war on multiple fronts. You have the muscle, you have the money, you have everything. But most businesses don't have that. So go after one fort at a time, capture it, own it, and then go to the next one. Would be the right strategy to do from a logic point of view and a strategy point of view.
Lovely brand promise guarantee. This is something that very, very effective in the scaling of frame. Thank you for explaining that, Ajay. A lot of us know about SWOT analysis. A lot of we have gone through this, and every company, as an individual and as an organization, we do this. But scaling up framework talks about something different. They don't talk about SWOT, but they talk about SWT. Would you please explain what this is and how it is important for an organization today?
Well, I think the S and W are the same, right? Strengths and weaknesses for an organization. And like they say in the traditional SWOT analysis, the opportunities and threats are external. What really happens is it becomes slightly restrictive. Rather than that, if you open the thought process to trends. Now, trends are so very important from a strategic point of view because if you are taking strategic decisions about your business in the longer run, I think it's very important. And there are strategic trends that are in every area. It could be in technology, could be in socio-economic, could be regulatory, all of these areas. If as a business you are keeping an eye on the trends, then one is able to figure out which are the waves that you should surf or what is something that can hit you. Like if you're in the fintech space or the AI space, regulatory elements are something that you should always be keeping an eye out on because what's brewing there globally. If there are regulations that get passed in one domain, it's a likelihood at some point of time or the other some version of that will come into India if you are operating in India, right? Stuff like that. What is social? Like we work in Africa with clients, and one very important facet that we look at is, what's the rate at which the per capita income is changing and growing, right? What is it in different parts of the market that we see? Now, this is a very important social trend because the kind of products that our clients will bring out there will be relevant from the evolution of the market itself, right? So when we work with these markets, these are the trends that are very important for us. And these trends don't affect in the short run. But in the next 3, 5, 7 years, they can play a big difference. And if you have an early mover advantage there, if you're able to make headway into that and you're able to establish yourself into that space, then you become the undisputed leader as the market grows. Obviously, you have to fight to hold your position, but you're able to do that. So that's the reason why we focus upon trends, because in our opinion, trends become a much larger approach as a strategic thinking among the leadership team and gives you opportunities or tells you the things that you have to be mindful of even far before you're hit by it in advance, as it is. And you're consciously doing all this time. That means every quarter you'll actually go back and review and say, okay, has something changed in our trends? Has something changed in the market? Is there in all of these 6 parameters that we talk about? And that is why it becomes so much more important as compared to the slightly narrower view of opportunities and threats, which people are not able to broaden themselves to look at things which will actually make a significant impact to the organization.
Absolutely. Trends is the important facet of the scaling up framework to understand. And very nicely said that it needs to be visited every quarter, that when we are having a quarterly meeting. Now, we are coming towards the end of our webinar, but there's one last googly I want to throw, Ajay. Uh, Give an example where you failed in scaling up an organization, scaling up a.
Yeah, I think it's a good question and a fair one. And yeah, we've had a share of fabulous successes within the company that I've worked with, and we've also had at least 1 or 2 failures, and 2 failures where ultimately we also walked away from that client also because of multiple reasons that we found. And yes, we have to admit that we were not effective. So I'll give you. I won't obviously name the company. This was a Noida-based, Delhi-based company that we were working with. They had a national sales system across the India. So they were obviously regions across the world, and they're headquartered in Delhi. And the director reached out to us saying that he wanted to implement scaling up. He's also an investor in a significant way in many businesses. And this is one of his businesses. So he doesn't run the business full time. He had a CEO who runs this business. And the director was the one who came to us and said that we'd like you to work with my business. Okay, so we said, fantastic. We initiated the activity, initiated the work. And obviously, at the superficial level, everybody was obviously buying in. They liked the system. They said, yes, let's do it, and all that kind of stuff. But about 6 months into the implementation, one of the things that we realized is that the CEO of the company, even though the title was CEO, the CEO of the company was functioning like a VP sales, right? Because his primary focus was generating business. He would be traveling the entire country, about 20 days in a month. He'd be going to different locations and branches, driving. And obviously, he grew from that level. So he was incidentally the sales head at one point of time. He grew to the CEO. Unfortunately, I think he never took off the sales hat. Another good and bad part of that was that his own commitment to implementing the framework was slightly lower. That means he had reasons to miss meetings because he was traveling, whatever else, right? And he would be busy in customer meetings. So, what are the signal that was going to the rest of the organization when the CEO is not around and the CEO does not participate? Is hey, this is not so important because the CEO is going to be asking other questions. He's not asking you around these questions. So, what really happens is there was a disconnect. The director was keen, the director was interested, the director believed in this framework, but the CEO was, and I don't think he was doing anything wrong. And maybe he did it unconsciously, maybe he did not even do it consciously for that matter. So he was busy playing the sales head's hat and not giving the importance to the organizer. The signaling was mixed. And that mixed signaling ensured that even the rest of the organization would start, there were gaps in the way the things were moving in. And when we went and spoke to the director, he said, hey, listen, this is where it is. He says, sweet. I cannot change this guy because, this gentleman, this is what it is. That's what he makes it work. I don't have the bandwidth and time to be able to get down to do the business. So we said, hey, if there is no solution to this, then it doesn't make sense because you're going to waste your time, energy, and money because your people are not going to take it seriously as we go along. And there are going to be big gaps. So rather than, sitting back after 1 year and 2 years and saying, hey, it didn't work, I think let's call it quits. So we actually walked away, right? So something like that. And another situation that we had, I don't want to go into detail, but I think I'm giving you a drift that a scaling up implementation requires commitment, right? Commitment from the founders, commitment from the leadership team. And obviously that commitment builds in when they see results, but it has to be there. If that is not there, that willingness is not there, because at the beginning, there is going to be confusion. There is going to be an existing things that the organization does. There is some elements of new things that scaling up brings in, and that mismatch happens because it doesn't gel perfectly. And something will have to replace something at some point of time. It happens seamlessly when people experience the benefits. When they do that, their adaptation rates start increasing, because of which when we go in slow. We don't try to dump the whole stuff, right? And this is why it's about a year before you really start seeing the best output out of it, is because by that 6 months time, settling down happens. Next 6 months, the impact starts coming in. And by the end of 1 year, you really start saying, okay, this is making a big difference to us. And that's the reason why a lot of companies will land up going to year 2 or even a year 3, because they see the fantastic value that is adding to the changes in business. So that's an example of how failure happened for us. And I'm proud of that, because at the end of the day, it's good to be able to even tell your client that it's not working. Because in my opinion, that's as important as helping them to deliver value, is to also figure out that what's not working for them then.
And it's the integrity which is most important. This is how we live by,
Yeah.
on the words that we say. And this is shown time and again in the efforts and in the processes that we follow. Thank you, Ajay, for that uh, wonderful clarification of lot of things that scaling up offers. We are coming towards the end. There are very few minutes left. If there are any questions, we're willing to take them now on the chat. Please put your questions in the chat. And Sangeeta, may I request you to put the QR code? And ladies and gentlemen, we request you to please take this QR code and give us the feedback. That will take just a minute. Scan this code and give us your feedback right away. Please show a thumbs up if you have taken, if you have been able to click a picture of you're able to see the form, and then we will move on to the questions and answer. The feedback is required, ladies and gentlemen, because we are bringing in webinars month after month after month. and we want to bring in the right kind of uh, guest speakers who will give value to the time that you are spending with us once in a month. And this also helps build in knowledge, network, and also association awareness of the scaling up framework. The book Scaling Up Framework by Vern Harnish is available at almost any bookstore or online. We would recommend, very highly recommend you to go through that book and read it. It's one of the best in business managing, or a framework that offers. And if you need any help or guidance or support, you know whom to contact. Ajay Hiraskar. Are there any questions? Anyone wants to know anything particular about the scaling up framework from Ajay, an expert in the field, and also something? Oops.
So, quick question: how do you all get engaged with a business that is looking at adopting this framework? Do you all handle them? Do you facilitate the entire process of scaling up? How do you all get involved?
Yeah. So, answer to the question is yes, we do handle the leadership team, not just the founders, but we handle the leadership team that we work with. Typically, in our engagements, there are three people from our side who get involved. There is a certified scaling up coach, there is one of our certified associate coaches, and an accountability partner. And what we do with that is like when it comes to meeting rhythms, like the daily meetings, daily hurdles, weekly meetings, for a certain frequency of time, for a certain period of time, we are also present in those meetings just as observers to ensure that what the recommended format is being followed. So what really happens is it doesn't become a game of Chinese whispers. You tell somebody this is the way the meeting should happen, they tell somebody else, and after 3 months you discover something entirely different is happening. So we do that as a handholding there. And then beyond that, because there are lots of tools within scaling up, our associate coaches work along with the leadership team to ensure that that fundamental understanding what the tool is and how does it operate is also driven down as it is. So all of these are there. And then beyond that, when we do our, there are daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly meetings. The quarterly meetings is where the OPSP is built from scratch entirely every quarter. And that is something where the coaches are involved. We actually do it physically with the leadership team, because of which most of our engagements are minimum for a year. We actually don't work with a client for less than a year also, actually. So because of a longer term engagement, it's not like a training program, something where you just come and talk and go away. It's about handholding the team to implement the concepts.
Gotcha. And it starts from the strategic direction of the companies, helping or supporting the founders stroke leadership team to put
Right.
that in place, and then
Right.
subsequently having a
Right.
plan
In fact,
to roll it out over a period of time. And then
it starts with an assessment. It starts with an assessment of where you stand as an organization, where you are, and every all the leaders go through a set of questions. We do that, and then subsequently we also go and we do an ENPS and Net Promoter Score from your employees also. So we collate feedback. We look at a financial statement. So there is a lot of back end work that happens in before the engagement starts, and then after that we start off by a workshop, which is the 2-day workshop where we cover the framework as well as build the OPSP the first time around, the first version of the OPSP. So yes, it does start with all of that. It starts with conversation with the founders in terms of what their ambitions are, what are the blockers to it. When we're looking at the assessment, we're looking at our employee scores, we get a feel of all that. And that helps us to create a customized roadmap for every client then.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Ajay, there
Thank
is a
you.
question over here.
Yeah, sure. Please
It
go ahead,
says,
Sanita.
how does one implement KPIs in an organization that has never previously had one?
Yeah, so I think partially I answered that question earlier where Vikram asked that as it is, that you look at companies, whatever are their goals, what are the goals and their priorities. You also look at what are the JDs for a particular role, and then use that as a starting point and build from that, and you keep refining it over a period of 2 or 3 quarters before you'll get the right set of KPIs. So I answered that earlier, but I'm answering that for the benefit of others who might have missed it. Okay, are we ready with the poll, Rajesh?
I think Rajesh is frozen here. I think we lost him.
Okay.
Must be an internet issue.
So any other questions from you, Divyesh or Dheeraj? Or for that matter, I think I can see Bharat is also here. Bharat and Ravi.
So are there any examples of like some companies and what they could achieve using this framework?
Okay, so one of the companies which actually you have somebody from that company attending the workshop out here. You have Anand Bapat, who's a part of a company called Global, right? So they're an engineering division of and chemical company, large chemical company, Glor and Vale. So at the point of time, so Anand is a part of Gravel. Actually, he's recently joined them and he's attending the workshop right now. So we started working with Gravel about 4 years back. At that point of time, and we have an video testimonial also of the owner of Gravel, Rohit Moore. So they had a situation where for the past 10 years, their business was flat. They had actually plateaued out. They were already a large player in their segment. They're into electroplating plants. They manufacture electroplating plants. And in that segment, their business was flat. I will not quote the numbers because that is confidential. But for the last 10 years, their business was flat. Their profitability was under tremendous strain because they are a part of a bigger division. They had to report back to headquarters in terms of how and what they were doing. So when they started implementing the scaling up framework, I think that clarity of thought process that ensured that, first of all, getting processes in place, getting priorities aligned, they were able to start delivering much better in terms of the client expectation and projects. And they were able to win a couple of very large projects in the process because of their ability to be able to bid to customers much more effectively to what their challenges and needs were and to position themselves there. Now, fast forward 4 years later, they are at a place where they did 3.7x of revenue, what they started off with just 4 or 5 years back last year, right? This year, they will cross more than that. They are highly profitable now. They are actually turned out to be the most profitable division in the entire company now, right? Which was a rarity earlier, right? That is something that's turned around, and they've been able to extend themselves into many more product lines. They were able to acquire one other company in Bangalore in the process, right? So all of these things really came across because they were becoming more profitable. Their productivity efficiency was better because of the scaling up framework, and we do have Rohit Moore, the director of Gravel Engineering, who talks about this in this video, and we can share that with you all if you want. So this is just a quick example. There are several other examples. If you go to our website, you'll find other videos like this, where clients who experience it, because it's not about what I say, right? It's about what our clients feel and say is more important. So I was just trying to pull out that video, but I can share that with you all subsequently. If anybody else can pull out that video and put it on the chat message, I think that will be useful. So I'm just giving a quick example, more in the interest of time, because you asked this specific question. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that is really answers the